What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to go over a little bit of AC since I haven't really been playing it since new additions and new fixes came out for this game. And I still gotta say, it's still a little boring to me, and there are still bugs going around I wanted to address. So I'm just playing it casually this week. You start off fighting tier 2s just like before. It's easy to occupy regions this way with, your own tier 2 characters. And you got to remember that class is very, very important in order for you to get some of these wins. So I always equip my characters with its opposite class in order to better equip myself to fight some of these opponents. And I'm doing it here just because, it doesn't really matter because they're all tier 1s. And tier 1s are usually going to get beat by tier 2s. So, this showcase is going to start off a little bit like dull. But, I want to showcase some of the changes that they made. Some of the changes that they made include the time differences. So now you get to play AC for an hour instead of, I believe it was 2, which makes things pretty fast. I think they changed up the time zones a little bit so it's more convenient for players. I think since the changes to the times, they've given certain restrictions on when you're eligible to attack a region because they put a few minute barrier on it. So these changes are pretty good, but the gameplay of AC to me is still pretty below par. You have to rely too much on the AI, and that could get very, very frustrating, or it could get redundantly easy. So the same tactics still apply. Type when you go into a region, depending on which region you're occupying, put your stronger tunes so the enemy would have a second guess in conquering that region, because sometimes you may just want to go down the middle. You may not be able to win, as AC is a very team-based game. You need to be very active. You need to have at least like 10 members available to you if you're competing in higher levels, like top 100, top 150. So while these tactics still apply, the gameplay is still quite redundant. However, you can still find some fun in it if you've built your tunes for PvP. And you could use a lot of CTPs that people kind of regard as like fodder CTPs, and you can put them on certain tunes that aren't normally PvP oriented and make them better. Or for the older PvP meta, you could keep the original CTPs on them, the PvP CTPs that made them meta in the first place, and you could still potentially make them meta in AC. Also, keep in mind it's important to have tier 4s instead of tier 3s if you want to compete. It's important to build up as many debuff removal lead characters as you can, because debuff removal lead is pretty essential in AC, unless maybe like the tune has a high amount of dodge, like maybe Spider-Man. It's important to build as many supports as you can, even the tier 2 or the tier 3 supports that aren't tier 4. Taskmaster, even somebody like Exodus, maybe even somebody like Enchantress, Mysterio. These supports are important for you to build. And, While AC is going to maybe bore you a little bit, AC is also going to help you in expanding your roster, which is good because for many game modes, I would say like 2/3 of the roster are pretty much like useless investments unless you are competing in AC. Then your roster is greatly expanded. So as you saw there, I basically took over 2 regions that were closest to me by myself because I used all of my tier 2s and none of my more important characters. Unfortunately, the team overtook those regions over time, but the points still counted. So the better amount of points you can get, the more likely that you're going to stay in the middle of the park and at least keep your ranking at a steady level, because you're not going to win all the time, especially when you get up the AC ladder. And you're especially not going to win if your team is not active at the time. So here we go more into a medium run where I'm fighting like sub meta, and I'm using a lot of my meta here, and as you can see, I'm basically one-shotting a lot of these teams. So these matches are going in pretty fast, and because I'm using stronger tunes, the enemy is going to think twice about conquering that region, especially when they're using all of their other meta on other more important regions like region 5. That's the most important region because it gives the most amount of points. So when my team was active, we were taking the board, and there was a region where I used most of my primary meta, and that region stayed locked in place for a few sessions, which gathers my team more points overall. So this is pretty good, especially if you just want to keep your ranking steady. And, I did use a little sneak peek of Apocalypse, and I'm going to showcase Apocalypse a little later in the video. I just wanted to cover AC in its entirety and just showcase some of the changes that they made, and to showcase like maybe just to cover like some brief tactics if you didn't already know how to utilize it. By the way, during this playthrough, I didn't set up my pre-made team selections, which you can do, and it will definitely speed up your time in picking the teams that you want, because usually I'm scrambling around through 200 characters and I'm trying to pick which ones could maybe work with which. And when you pre-make your teams, you don't have to do all that. You can just skip like a good 30 seconds of prepping and just go right into the fight, just picking a pre-made team. This is going to be very, very important in competing when you're competing in high levels. And, just to go over more of AC, let's go over some of the tactics to use against the top 5. So, if you want to go over the from 6 to 10, Madeline, Deadpool, Jean, Spider-Man, a lot of these guys can be killed by like reflect tunes. So for Jean and maybe Madeline Pryor, you could use somebody like Destroyer or Icon. For maybe Deadpool, you could use somebody like Colossus. And of course, you may also want to use somebody like Luke Cage, a combat who does physical reflect. If you want to take on somebody like Ghost Rider, who does mostly damage to villains, you may want to use a hero to fight him. The top 5 could easily wipe out any of the bottom 6 through 10. So to fight the top 5, right? Let's say you want to fight a sentry. You may want to go with an Adam Warlock, and maybe a Logan. If you want to fight somebody like Silver Surfer, you may want to use somebody like Thanos or somebody like Logan. If you want to fight Wolverine, you may want to go for Adam, or you may want to go for Silver Surfer. If you want to fight a Thanos, you could easily go with a Sentry. Easily. And probably an Adam as well. Now, these builds in AC could definitely vary. If you want to use a Brilliant Conquest on Sentry, you can. If you want to use a Greed on Sentry, you can. Those are the recommended. For Surfer, Conquest is definitely the most recommended CTP to use for AC. For Logan, Greed is definitely the top choice CTP to use, because if you do decide to go with a Conquest Logan, you should probably pair him with Colossus, because Energy Atoms or Greed Atoms could definitely bypass the Conquest Logan. And I would still recommend a Greed or an Energy Atom in AC for one-shot potential and capabilities. And you can still equip a Greed Atom with somebody like Colossus to bulk up the damage. Just remember that you should be equipping them also with debuff removal leadership. Thanos, usually you gotta pair him with a Brilliant Conquest. Unfortunately, Thanos isn't as diverse of his CTP choices as the other four. You would only need to pair him with a Conquest, because what a Brilliant Conquest does is it negates Reflect and it gives him the proper amount of defense. And because your roster and the enemy's roster is so expanded, not all the time Thanos is going to be equipped with a support. And if he is equipped with a support or two supports, you could still bypass him with tunes that carry enough offense as well as debuffs, because since Thanos negates his own debuff leadership as soon as he gets hit and as soon as he uses the first skill, characters like Greed Wolverine can easily one-shot and bypass, as well as Energy Atoms. These are just some of the tactics I'm going to use in the future to combat much stronger teams in AC. I'm going to try to incorporate AC in my PvP videos when I can, because I don't think that AC gives a proper analysis and detail of how PvP characters perform, because it's so reliant on the AI using the skills properly that it's very much 50-50. So I could use the recommended builds or some of the recommended builds, and then all of a sudden you get one shot and you won't understand why. It's very like RNG based, which I absolutely despise. And this is why I like to cover a lot of PvP videos primarily with Timeline Battle, because Timeline Battle I'm able to use manual play to showcase the character the best that I can. And in Otherworld Battle, it's not 3v3, it's maybe like 2v2, so the AI is more susceptible to using proper skills and tanking skills. And then also in Otherworld Battle, you could place your characters in a certain position of the map where they won't be targeted as quickly, so that way the character will showcase a little bit longer instead of getting completely just outright one-shotted. Unfortunately, in this game mode, it's basically who can do their best skill faster. So that's why I claim that it's RNG based. And, I obviously don't recommend pairing some sub-meta tunes like Apocalypse, who don't use their best and primary skills first versus somebody like Wolverine who does primarily use his best skill first. So against Wolverine, Apocalypse is almost always going to die. So the reason why I mention Apocalypse is because Apocalypse is a native world boss tier 2 that just got a uniform. And let me just say, Apocalypse comes with a lot of problems. More so than a lot of the previous meta that came out. So in a lot of these fights here, I'm showcasing Apocalypse in the best possible way that I can because he's dying pretty quickly. And this is without his artifact, of course, so he is going to die pretty quickly. But his skills have a good amount of range, so you can use them from afar. And, of course, he has an ignore iframe with destruction, so he can potentially one-shot some meta, but it's only against like other sub-meta. Like if you were to put Apocalypse up against the meta that aren't debuffed, because right now all of the primary meta are debuffed, and Apocalypse still lost to a basic debuffed Wolverine pretty easily, even despite his decreased damage received of 45%. I mean, Apocalypse is probably the worst PvP built tune to come out in a long time. Nobody is willing to pay for the cost of Apocalypse when Apocalypse is maybe like meta in a game mode like AC. I wouldn't even say he's meta in Otherworld Battle unless you have him tier 4 with his artifact and with destruction, because I don't think that any other CTP can actually work. I mean, in order to put a Conquest on him, it has to be brilliant, and you have to put Colossus with him, or else it's not going to work. Especially against Blast, it's not going to work. He doesn't have any penetration other than the penetration he gets from destruction, so he can't one-shot at all. His skills are partial iframes. His second skill is super susceptible to reflect, and it's super susceptible to cancellation. His fourth is actually his strongest skill. His fifth, it varies. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's not. And his fifth also is not insta-cancelable. His fourth is insta-cancelable, but his fourth lacks damage when you insta-cancel it. His third is insta-cancelable, but you have to combine it with something like his second skill in order to get the good amount of damage that ignores iframes, because otherwise the third skill is not going to hit. Now, this match here was arguably one of my most frustrating matches ever, because Apocalypse was struggling so hard to kill a basic Jean, my Jean Grey. And then he gets one-shotted by Spider-Man before, like, barely killing him. And the only way I was able to get that kind of damage on Jean, who has mind resistance, is from extra elemental damage from somebody like Ancient One or somebody like Storm. Because he also needs that kind of offense support in order to do, like, decent damage. And, you know, maybe I don't want to use... I don't want to use, like, Ancient One. I want to use, like, maybe Wong or something. Or I want to use, like, somebody else. It's ridiculous to me how, you know, if I were to go and pair Colossus with Apocalypse, it wouldn't do anything to bump his defense, and it would actually make him worse because he actually desperately needs offense. Especially when he has decreased damage received by 45%, which is closer to Thanos. He has no heal, so he still can be easily susceptible to almost any kind of one-shot, and it's really, really sad. And unfortunately, I couldn't really save the character. I was getting so frustrated with the character that I'm no longer using him. I would actually get more benefit out of using somebody like Dr. Octopus. Yeah, Dr. Octopus. Because Dr. Octopus, I could at least charge up his Awaken skill and he can get me a kill that's relatively consistent. All of Apocalypse's skills and kills have been ridiculously inconsistent. Like, don't ask me how I did that. Don't ask me how I did that sentry kill on with Apocalypse, because the only way I could do that was by debuffing him from afar. That was the only way I was going to be able to kill that sentry, because otherwise he cannot kill sentry at all. Not even a little bit. At least with Captain America's new uni, I could actually kill sentry in some instances. I cannot kill sentry with Apocalypse. Period. I cannot kill any kind of Colossus support of any of the meta. Wolverine I can't kill. I mean, maybe if I'm lucky. Adam I definitely can't kill. And Surfer I can't kill if Surfer has Colossus with him. So this makes Apocalypse virtually useless in 80% of situations in PvP. You know, he's dying from pretty much anything. And, you know, he's not good to base a team around, because the only, like, meta mutants are, like, maybe Jean Grey and Wolverine. And pairing him with Jean Grey and Wolverine is useless, because his passive of giving mutants 12 seconds of debuff removal is pointless when Jean Grey's leadership gives it to all allies. And it's like it was a really like big mistake by Netmarble. They should have just gave him the passive to all allies. It doesn't make any sense, you know. And the only way I'm able to get kills is by, like, you know, getting Wolverine to 1% first, killing Sentry once beforehand, killing Adam once beforehand, and getting him under debuffs. And even then, it's still difficult. It's still ridiculously difficult. I mean, a rotation I can give you if you really want to use him somewhere, like for manual play, I would say to do 3, cancel into 4, then wait, and then maybe go into 5-2 if necessary. 3 cancel 4 can get you a kill with destruction, but you know, it's a maybe, because you're relying on the destruction proc, you're relying on the penetration of destruction, and you're relying on him not to die after his skills are initiated. I would honestly say just to avoid the character altogether. Unless you are a real AC fanatic, maybe like you need an extra tune for Otherworld battle and you have his artifact, I would say to completely avoid Apocalypse altogether, because the only way you can probably use him is in manual play, and his manual play potential is abysmal. Like at tier 3 it's abysmal, at tier 4 it's still abysmal, and with his artifact it could maybe help, but you can't equip him with Conquest, because 1, he would need Colossus like I said before, and 2, he couldn't get sufficient kills. So you would essentially be wasting a meta PvP CTP on a non-meta tune. Like, I would even say, like, Apocalypse is barely top 20. I think Captain America with his new uni and without any kind of revive actually has more potential than Apocalypse. I've seen my Captain America at tier 3 kill a tier 4 Adam Warlock. It's taken me so many tries to kill a basic Warlock, let alone a basic Jean, who Captain America absolutely stomps. I would say, all in all, avoid this character completely. Spend your investments elsewhere. As you can see, I showcase a lot of his good moments and plenty of his bad moments. So I hope you received this information, and make sure that you invest in characters that are much better than him. There was a brand new update with zombies, you know, Captain America, Doctor Strange. These characters are worth investing because they're cheap and they could do some level in all game modes. They could do some level of PvP and some level of PvE. So invest wisely. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tune into the next one. I'll see you next time. Take care.